Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had heard every joke in the book, every snicker, every whispered comment when she walked past the barracks at Forward Operating Base Phoenix in Afghanistan. To her fellow soldiers, she wasn't a decorated communications specialist with 8 years of experience. She wasn't the woman who had graduated top of her class from the Army Signal School. She was just the radio girl. "Hey Santos, can you get me a weather report while you're playing with your little buttons?" Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison called out from across the communications tent, earning laughs from the other soldiers gathered around the tactical maps. His voice dripped with the kind of condescension that had followed Maria through every deployment, every assignment, every day of her military career. Maria's fingers never stopped moving across the radio console. She was monitoring 3 different frequencies simultaneously, tracking unit movements across the valley, and coordinating supply drops for outposts scattered across 40 miles of hostile territory. But to Morrison and his crew, she was just sitting in a chair, wearing a headset, safe from the real action. "Copy that, Falcon 2, she spoke into her microphone, acknowledging a patrol report from the Eastern Ridge. Her voice was steady, professional. She had learned long ago not to let the comments show on her face. "Be advised, you have thunderstorms moving in from the northwest. Recommend you find cover within the next 30 minutes. Morrison walked over to her station, his boots heavy on the plywood floor. At 6'3", he towered over her seated position. "You know, Santos, when I joined the Army, radio operators were men, real soldiers who could carry their weight in a firefight." The tent fell silent except for the static and chatter from the radio equipment. Maria continued her work, adjusting frequencies and logging communications. She had reported Morrison's harassment twice to their commanding officer, Captain Williams. Both times she was told to toughen up and work it out amongst yourselves. "At least I know which end of an antenna works," Maria replied without looking up. A few soldiers chuckled, but Morrison's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, Santos. You might be hot stuff behind that radio, but out there in the real world you're just dead weight." Maria finally turned to face him. Her brown eyes were calm, but there was steel underneath. "Sergeant Morrison, I've coordinated more successful missions than you've even participated in. Maybe if you spent less time running your mouth and more time studying your maps, you'd know that." The tension in the tent was thick enough to cut. Morrison's friends shifted uncomfortably. Even they knew Maria's reputation. She had been the voice in their earpieces during dozens of operations. When they were lost in sandstorms, she guided them home. When they needed emergency medical evacuations, she made it happen. When supply convoys were running late, she rerouted them through safer passages. But Morrison wasn't backing down. Coordinating from a cozy tent doesn't make you a soldier. It makes you a secretary with a fancy radio. Before Maria could respond, Captain Williams entered the tent. The small man with graying temples took in the scene immediately. "What's the situation here?" "Just discussing operational efficiency, sir," Morrison said, snapping to attention. Captain Williams looked at Maria, then at Morrison. "Santos, I need a status report on all units in Sector 7. Maria consulted her logs. Alpha Company completed their patrol of the northern villages at 1400 hours. Bravo Company is still conducting house-to-house searches in Kandahar village. Charlie Company. Sir, Charlie Company missed their last check-in. They were supposed to report 30 minutes ago." The captain's expression grew serious. "What's their last known position?" "Grid reference 41 SMB 123456, approximately 4 clicks northeast of here. They were investigating reports of insurgent activity near the old mining complex." Morrison scoffed. "Probably just radio trouble. Maybe if our communications specialist actually knew how to maintain equipment." "Sergeant Morrison, you're dismissed." Captain Williams cut him off sharply. "Santos, keep trying to raise Charlie Company. If they don't respond in the next 15 minutes, we're going to have a problem." As Morrison and his friends filed out of the tent, one of them muttered just loud enough for Maria to hear. "Probably pressed the wrong button and lost them." Maria's jaw tightened, but she focused on her equipment. She cycled through Charlie Company's assigned frequencies, tried their emergency channels, even attempted to reach individual soldiers' personal radios. Nothing. Static on every channel. "Charlie 1, this is Phoenix Base, how copy?" She called for the dozenth time. "Charlie Company, any station, this is Phoenix Base, please respond." Silence. The mining complex where Charlie Company had been investigating was in a valley known for its poor radio reception. Surrounded by steep hills and riddled with caves, it was a communications nightmare. But Maria had worked with Charlie Company before. Their radio operator, Specialist Davis, was competent and reliable. He wouldn't just go silent without reason. Captain Williams returned to her station 20 minutes later. "Any word?" "Negative, sir. I've tried every frequency, every protocol. Something's wrong." The captain rubbed his temple. Charlie Company consisted of 12 good soldiers, including Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had a wife and 2 kids back in Texas. They couldn't just vanish. "Sir," Maria said quietly, "request permission to take a mobile communications unit closer to their last known position. From the ridgeline overlooking the valley, I might be able to establish contact." "Absolutely not. I'm not sending more soldiers into a potential hostile situation. Sir, with respect, I'm not just any soldier. I know that area. I've coordinated 17 successful operations in that valley. I know the terrain, the dead zones, the relay points. If Charlie Company is in trouble, I can find them." Captain Williams studied her face. Maria Santos had never let him down. In 2 years at this base, she had been the constant voice of reliability. When everything went wrong, when plans fell apart, when soldiers were in danger, Maria was the one who brought them home. But she was also right about the valley. It was dangerous. Insurgents used the caves for storage and planning. The old mining tunnels created perfect ambush points. And if Charlie Company was already in trouble, the answer is no, Santos. "We'll send a reconnaissance drone in the morning." "Sir, by morning it might be too late." As if to emphasize her point, a distant rumble of thunder echoed across the base. The storm Maria had warned the patrol about was moving in faster than expected. Soon, even drone surveillance would be impossible. That night, Maria lay on her narrow cot in the women's quarters, listening to the rain pound against the tent walls. Somewhere out there, 12 soldiers might be wounded, trapped, or worse, and she was the only one who might be able to reach them. She thought about Morrison's words. Dead weight. Just a secretary with a fancy radio. For 8 years she had endured comments like those. Men who assumed that because she wasn't kicking down doors or firing assault rifles, she wasn't really a soldier. But Maria knew something they didn't understand. In modern warfare, information was everything. Communications were the nervous system of the military. Without radios, without coordination, without someone like her to connect the pieces, soldiers died. Charlie Company was proof of that. Somewhere in that valley, they were beyond the reach of help because their communications had failed. And while everyone else was content to wait until morning, Maria knew that in combat, minutes could mean the difference between life and death. As lightning flashed outside her tent, illuminating the base in stark white light, Maria Santos made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow she would show them all what a radio girl was really capable of. At 0400 hours, while the base slept under the dying storm, Maria Santos moved like a ghost through the equipment tent. She had memorized every inch of this place, every piece of gear, every supply cabinet. Her hands found what she needed in the darkness: a portable radio unit, extra batteries, emergency medical supplies, and night vision equipment. She wasn't stealing. She was borrowing. And if her plan worked, she'd return everything before morning roll call. If it didn't work, well, the court-martial would be the least of her problems. The motor pool was her next stop. The Humvees were locked down. But Maria had learned more than just radio operations during her 8 years of service. Growing up in East LA, she'd learned things the Army didn't teach. Things that came in handy when you needed to requisition a vehicle for an unauthorized rescue mission. The engine of the lightweight tactical vehicle turned over quietly in the pre-dawn darkness. Maria had disabled the GPS tracking system and radio beacon. For the next few hours, this vehicle officially didn't exist. As she drove through the main gate, the sleepy guard waved her through without question. Maria had established a routine of early morning equipment checks at the relay stations. Nobody questioned Staff Sergeant Santos when she said she was going to fix a communications problem. But this morning, she was driving toward the most dangerous valley in their sector of operations. The road to the mining complex was barely more than a goat path carved into the hillside. Maria's vehicle climbed steadily, winding through terrain that grew more desolate with each mile. The storm had left the ground muddy and treacherous, but it had also washed away recent tire tracks. She couldn't tell if Charlie Company had even made it this far. 20 minutes into her journey, Maria reached the first relay station, a communications tower perched on a rocky outcrop that overlooked the valley. This was where she would set up her mobile unit and attempt to contact the missing soldiers. As she unpacked her equipment, the sun began to rise over the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Through her binoculars, Maria could see the old mining complex, a cluster of concrete buildings and rusted equipment scattered around the entrance to several tunnel systems. It looked abandoned, empty, but Maria had learned not to trust appearances in Afghanistan. She powered up her radio and began systematic sweeps of all frequencies. Charlie Company, any station, this is Phoenix Actual, how copy? Her voice carried across multiple channels, searching for any sign of life. Static answered her, but then faintly, almost buried in the electronic noise, she heard something, a voice, weak, distorted, but definitely human. Nix, help. Trapped. Maria's heart raced. She fine-tuned the frequency, adjusted the antenna angle, and called again. Station calling Phoenix, say again. You're weak but readable. Phoenix Base. This is Charlie 7. We need immediate medical evacuation. Specialist Davis, Charlie Company's radio operator. His voice was strained, barely a whisper. Charlie 7, this is Phoenix. What's your status and location? We're trapped in the mining complex. Tunnel collapsed. 3 wounded. Rodriguez is bad. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the man with 2 kids back in Texas. Charlie 7, how many personnel do you have mobile? 4, maybe 5. Others are pinned. We need heavy equipment. Excavation team. The radio crackled and went silent. Maria tried repeatedly to re-establish contact, but Davis was gone. Either his radio had died or worse. But she had learned what she needed to know. Charlie Company wasn't missing. They were buried alive. She grabbed her binoculars and studied the mining complex again. Now she could see what she had missed before. Fresh damage to one of the buildings. Debris scattered around what must be a tunnel entrance. And there, barely visible tire tracks leading to the site. Charlie Company had been investigating insurgent activity in the tunnels when something had caused a collapse. Whether it was an ambush, an accident, or a deliberate trap didn't matter now. What mattered was that 12 soldiers were running out of time. Maria reached for her radio to call back to base, then stopped. She knew exactly what would happen. Captain Williams would order her to return immediately. He would send a full company with heavy equipment, engineers, and medical personnel. It would take them at least 4 hours to organize and deploy. Maybe longer. In 4 hours, the wounded soldiers might be dead. But there was another problem. The mining complex sat in a perfect kill zone. The surrounding hills provided ideal sniper positions and ambush points. If insurgents had caused the collapse, they might still be in the area, waiting for rescue teams to arrive. Maria studied the terrain through her binoculars, applying 8 years of tactical training that men like Morrison assumed she didn't possess. There was a route down the backside of the valley, following a dry creek bed that would provide cover most of the way to the complex. Dangerous but possible. She had 2 choices. Follow orders, return to base, and hope that Charlie Company could survive until the cavalry arrived, or break every regulation in the book and attempt a solo reconnaissance to determine if immediate assistance was possible. It wasn't really a choice at all. Maria secured her equipment and began the descent into the valley. The creek bed was treacherous, filled with loose rocks and hidden holes left by the storm. Twice her vehicle nearly slid off the narrow path, but the route kept her hidden from the surrounding hills, and the sound of her engine was muffled by the terrain. As she got closer to the mining complex, Maria could hear something that chilled her blood. Voices. Men speaking in Pashto, the local language, and they weren't trying to be quiet. She parked the vehicle behind a cluster of boulders and continued on foot, carrying her portable radio and medical supplies. Her training took over. Move quietly, stay low, use available cover, observe before acting. The voices were coming from a position overlooking the collapsed tunnel entrance. Through her binoculars, Maria counted at least 6 armed men positioned in the ruins of an old building. They were watching the tunnel, weapons ready. It was a trap. The tunnel collapse hadn't been an accident. Charlie Company had walked into an ambush, and now the insurgents were waiting for rescue teams to arrive so they could kill even more American soldiers. But they hadn't. Counted on a radio girl with a portable communications unit and 8 years of tactical experience. Maria keyed her radio, switching to an emergency frequency that bypassed normal base communications. Any station, this is Santos with emergency traffic. The response came immediately from a different base 40 miles away. Station calling emergency traffic. This is Falcon Base, go ahead. Falcon Base. I have 12 friendly personnel trapped by enemy action at grid reference 41 SMB 123456. Request immediate air support and medical evacuation. Be advised, hostile forces are in overwatch positions waiting to ambush rescue teams. Santos, did you say you have visual on hostile forces? Maria adjusted her position and counted again. Affirmative. I count at least 6 enemy personnel with small arms in prepared positions. They have direct line of sight to the trapped personnel. Santos, what unit are you with? We show no friendly forces in that area. Maria smiled grimly. Falcon Base, let's just say I'm a concerned citizen with good communications equipment. Can you provide air support or not? There was a long pause. Then, Santos, maintain your position and continue to observe. We have fast movers 15 minutes out. 15 minutes. Maria looked at her watch, then back at the tunnel entrance where Charlie Company was trapped. Somewhere in that rubble, Rodriguez was dying. The other wounded soldiers were counting on help that might come too late. But now Maria had another problem. In 15 minutes, when the airstrike hit the insurgent positions, the bad guys would know exactly where the observer was calling from. They would come looking for her, and she was completely alone, armed with nothing but a radio and the determination to bring her fellow soldiers home. As she settled into position to guide the incoming aircraft, Maria Santos realized that everything Morrison and the others had said about her was about to be put to the ultimate test. In 15 minutes, she would discover whether a radio girl could really be a soldier. The countdown had begun. Falcon Base, this is Santos. I have eyes on target. 6 enemy personnel in defensive positions, approximately 200 meters northeast of the trapped friendlies. They're dug in behind concrete barriers in the old processing building. Maria pressed herself against the rocky outcrop, using her binoculars to mark each insurgent position. The morning sun was climbing higher, and she could feel sweat despite the cool mountain air. 8 minutes until the jets arrived. Santos, we need exact coordinates for the strike. Can you laser designate? Negative, Falcon Base. I don't have laser designation equipment. But I can talk your pilots onto target. Maria had done this before, but never alone, never without backup. And never while 12 American soldiers were buried just 200 meters away from the blast zone. Copy that. Be advised, Reaper 1-1 and Reaper 1-2 are F-16s carrying precision-guided munitions. They'll need detailed directions to avoid hitting the trapped personnel. Maria studied the complex through her binoculars again. The mathematics of destruction ran through her mind. Blast radius, fragmentation patterns, structural collapse zones. She had learned this in training, but had never needed to apply it in a life-or-death situation. Falcon Base. The enemy positions are in a partially destroyed concrete building. The trapped friendlies are in underground tunnels approximately 200 meters southwest of that position. Recommend a precision strike on the building only. The underground personnel should be protected by the rock and dirt overhead. Roger that, Santos. Reaper flight is 2 minutes out. Do you have a clear route of egress after the strike? Maria looked around her position. She was on high ground with a clear view of the entire complex, but she was also completely exposed. When the bombs started falling, every insurgent in the valley would know someone was spotting for the Americans, and they would come looking for her. Falcon Base, I'll manage. Just get those jets here fast. Through her binoculars, she watched one of the insurgents stand up and point in her direction. Her heart stopped. Had they spotted her? The man picked up what looked like a radio and began speaking rapidly. Within seconds, the other insurgents were moving, repositioning themselves, looking toward the surrounding hills. They knew someone was watching them. Falcon Base, be advised. Enemy forces are aware of observation. They're moving to new positions. You need to get those aircraft here now. Santos, Reaper 1-1 reports visual on the valley. Can you confirm target location? Maria could hear the jets now high overhead, their engines cutting through the morning air like thunder. Reaper 1-1, this is Santos. Target is the concrete building complex at the northeast corner of the mining site. I count 6 enemy personnel taking cover behind walls and debris. Santos, I have eyes on the building. Confirm there are no friendlies in the target area. That's affirmative, Reaper. All friendlies are underground southwest of your target. You're cleared hot. The F-16 rolled into its attack run, a predatory silhouette against the blue sky. Maria watched through her binoculars as the pilot lined up on target, then released a single precision-guided bomb. The explosion was massive. The entire concrete building simply vanished in a cloud of dust and debris. The sound hit Maria like a physical blow, echoing off the valley walls for what seemed like forever. But even as the dust settled, Maria could see movement in the ruins. Not all of the insurgents had been in the building when it was hit. Good hit, Reaper 1-1. Target destroyed. But I still have enemy movement in the area. Copy that, Santos. Reaper 1-2 is standing by for cleanup. That's when Maria saw them. 3 insurgents had survived the bombing and were now moving directly toward her position. They had identified where the radio transmissions were coming from, and they were coming to silence her. Falcon Base, I have 3 enemy personnel moving to my location. I need immediate extraction or support. Santos, we have no assets available for extraction. Can you relocate? Maria looked at her tactical situation. The insurgents were climbing the hill toward her position, but they had to move carefully over the rocky terrain. She could probably reach her vehicle and escape. But if she left now, she would lose radio contact with the trapped soldiers, and without communications, any rescue attempt would be operating blind. Negative, Falcon Base. I'm staying with the trapped personnel. I'm their only communications link. Maria grabbed her portable radio and switched to Charlie Company's frequency. Charlie 7, this is Santos, how copy? Static answered her. She tried again, adjusting frequencies and power settings. Santos, this is Charlie 7. Davis's voice was even weaker than before. We heard explosion. What's happening? Charlie 7, we're coming to get you. I need a status report on your wounded. Rodriguez is unconscious. Lost a lot of blood. Martinez has a broken leg. Williams might have internal injuries. We need medical evacuation. Maria could hear the desperation in Davis's voice, and she could hear something else, the sound of shifting debris. The tunnel was still unstable. Time was running out. Charlie 7, help is on the way. Stay strong. She switched back to the emergency frequency. Falcon Base, I need you to relay a message to Phoenix Base. Tell them they need to get a medical evacuation team to grid reference 41 SMB 123456 immediately. I have 3 critical casualties that need emergency surgery. Santos Phoenix Base is already en route with a full rescue team, but they're 20 minutes out. Can you hold your position? Maria looked down the hill. The 3 insurgents were closer now, maybe 500 meters away. They were armed with assault rifles and had the advantage of numbers. She had a sidearm and a radio. Falcon Base, I'll hold as long as I can. What happened next would haunt Maria's memory for the rest of her life. The 3 insurgents split up, trying to surround her position. She could track their movement through the rocks below, but she couldn't engage all 3 at once. That's when her years of communications training became something more. Maria realized she wasn't just a radio operator anymore. She was the tactical coordinator for this entire operation. She had eyes on the battlefield, communications with air support, and knowledge of friendly positions. She was the central nervous system that could turn chaos into victory. Reaper 1-2, this is Santos. I have 3 enemy personnel moving to overrun my position. I need close air support. Santos, we can provide gun runs, but we need precise locations. Can you mark targets? Maria pulled out a small signal mirror, standard survival equipment that every soldier carried. Reaper 1-2, I'm going to flash a signal mirror at enemy positions. When you see the reflection, that's your target. It was insanely dangerous. Using the mirror would immediately reveal her exact location to the insurgents. But it was the only way to guide the aircraft onto target without laser designation equipment. Roger that, Santos. We see your position. Flash when ready. Maria took a deep breath, aimed the mirror at the closest insurgent, and reflected sunlight directly at him. The man immediately looked up, spotted her, and raised his rifle. Target marked, she called into her radio. The F-16's cannon erupted in a stream of fire that tore through the rocks where the insurgent had been hiding. But the other 2 were still moving, and now they knew exactly where she was. Maria grabbed her equipment and rolled to a new position, just as bullets began hitting the rocks where she had been lying. She keyed her radio again. Falcon Base, I'm taking direct fire. How far out is the rescue team? Santos Phoenix Rescue is 15 minutes from your location. 15 minutes. Maria checked her ammunition, 1 full magazine in her pistol plus 1 spare. Against 2 assault rifles at close range, it wouldn't be much of a fight. But then she heard something that changed everything. The sound of helicopter rotors getting closer fast. Santos, this is Phoenix Rescue. We're 3 minutes out. Can you mark the landing zone? Maria looked around desperately. The only flat area big enough for a helicopter was near the collapsed tunnel where Charlie Company was trapped. But that area was still potentially under enemy observation. Phoenix Rescue, be advised, landing zone may be under enemy fire. I have 2 hostile personnel still active in the area. Copy that, Santos. We're coming in hot. As the rescue helicopter appeared over the ridge, Maria made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. Instead of staying hidden and protecting herself, she stood up in full view of the remaining insurgents and began directing the landing with hand and arm signals. The bullets started flying immediately, but Maria Santos, the woman they had dismissed as just a radio operator, stood her ground and brought 12 soldiers home. Bullets whined past Maria's head as she stood on the rocky outcrop. Her arms stretched wide in the universal signal for land here. The Black Hawk helicopter pilot could see her clearly now, a lone figure silhouetted against the morning sky, directing him toward the collapsed tunnel where 12 soldiers waited for rescue. Phoenix Rescue, you're taking ground fire from 2 positions, 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock from the landing zone. Maria called into her radio, even as muzzle flashes lit up the rocks around her. Put down fast and stay low. The pilot's voice crackled back. Santos, get to cover. We can find the LZ ourselves. Negative, Phoenix Rescue. There are unstable rocks and debris around the tunnel entrance. I'm your only guide. Maria ducked as another burst of automatic fire chewed up the ground beside her, but she never stopped signaling. You're coming in perfect. 50 meters and closing. The Blackhawk touched down in a cloud of dust and rotor wash. Before the wheels were fully on the ground, combat medics and rescue specialists were pouring out of the aircraft, heading for the collapsed tunnel entrance. Maria watched from her elevated position as they began their work, knowing that every second counted for Rodriguez and the other wounded soldiers. But the 2 remaining insurgents weren't giving up. They had shifted positions and were now laying down suppressing fire, trying to keep the rescue team pinned down near the helicopter. Reaper 1-2, this is Santos. I need you to make another gun run. Enemy positions are now at my 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, approximately 300 meters from the helicopter. Santos, those positions are too close to the rescue team. We can't risk friendly fire. Maria studied the tactical situation. The insurgents had chosen their new positions perfectly, close enough to threaten the rescue operation, but too close to the Americans for air support to engage safely. It was a classic guerrilla tactic, but Maria had an idea born from 8 years of coordinating complex operations and understanding how all the pieces fit together. Phoenix Rescue, this is Santos. I need you to move the helicopter 50 meters north of the tunnel entrance. There's a flat area behind some large boulders that will give you cover from ground fire. Santos, we can't move now. We're in the middle of extracting casualties. Trust me, you move the bird, I'll keep the bad guys busy. What Maria did next would be talked about in every communications school in the Army for years to come. She began broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously, calling in false reports of massive reinforcements heading toward the valley. Falcon Base, this is Santos. I have visual on a full company of infantry approaching from the east. They'll be in position to assault the valley in 10 minutes. Apache 2-7, this is Santos with updated target coordinates. You are cleared to engage enemy positions on my mark. Artillery control, this is Santos. Fire mission, 6 rounds, high explosive, danger close. None of these units actually existed. There were no infantry reinforcements, no Apache helicopters, no artillery support. But Maria broadcast these messages on frequencies she knew the insurgents were monitoring. Every guerrilla fighter in Afghanistan carried radios tuned to American military frequencies, hoping to intercept intelligence. The effect was immediate. The 2 insurgents began falling back from their positions, believing they were about to be overwhelmed by superior forces. It was exactly the psychological warfare Maria had hoped for. Phoenix Rescue, enemy forces are withdrawing. You're clear to reposition. The Blackhawk lifted off and moved to the protected landing zone Maria had identified. Within minutes, the rescue team had reached the tunnel entrance and begun extracting the trapped soldiers. Maria watched through her binoculars as stretcher after stretcher was carried to the helicopter. Rodriguez was the first casualty loaded, unconscious, covered in dust and blood, but alive. Martinez followed, his leg splinted by his fellow soldiers. Williams was walking but supported by 2 medics. One by one, All 12 members of Charlie Company emerged from what could have been their tomb. Santos, this is Phoenix Rescue. All personnel recovered. We're ready for extract. What's your position? Maria looked at her tactical situation one more time. The insurgents had withdrawn, but they were still in the area. The rescue helicopter was loaded beyond capacity with casualties, and she was still alone on a hilltop with no transportation. Phoenix Rescue, I'm mobile. I have transportation back to base. Get those wounded soldiers to medical care. I'll be fine. Santos, we're not leaving you out here alone. That's an order, Phoenix Rescue. Those men need surgery now. Go. As the Blackhawk lifted off and headed back toward base, Maria felt a satisfaction she had never experienced before. For 8 years, she had been the voice in the radio helping others complete their missions. Today, she had been the mission. The drive back to Forward Operating Base Phoenix took Maria 2 hours over the treacherous mountain roads. By the time she arrived, word of the rescue had already spread throughout the base. As she pulled up to the motor pool, she found Captain Williams waiting for her with a very different expression than she had ever seen before. Santos, where the hell have you been? Sir, conducting a communications assessment of the eastern relay stations. There were some equipment malfunctions that needed immediate attention. Captain Williams studied her muddy uniform, her equipment that clearly showed signs of combat use, and her vehicle that had obviously been driven through rough terrain. Is that your official report, Sergeant? Yes, sir. Then that's what goes in the log. Captain Williams stepped closer and lowered his voice. Santos, what you did today, there aren't words for it. Rodriguez is in surgery right now, but the doctors say he's going to make it. All of them are going to make it because of you. As Maria walked toward the communications tent to file her equipment, she found her path blocked by Sergeant First Class Morrison and his crew. But something was different about their posture. Their expressions. Morrison stepped forward, his usual arrogance replaced by something Maria had never seen from him before. Respect. Santos, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Morrison. Yeah, I do. We all do. Morrison looked back at his men, then faced Maria again. Rodriguez is alive because of you. Martinez is going to walk again because of you. 12 good soldiers are coming. Home to their families because the woman we called just a radio operator turned out to be the best soldier any of us have ever served with. The communications tent fell silent as other soldiers gathered to listen. For 8 years, I thought being a soldier meant carrying a rifle and kicking down doors. But you showed me something today. You showed me that real soldiers, the ones who make the difference between mission success and mission failure, are the ones who never give up on their brothers and sisters. The ones who put the mission and their people above their own safety. Morrison extended his hand to Maria. Santos, I would be honored to serve under your command anytime, anywhere. As Maria shook his hand, she realized that everything had changed. Not just Morrison's attitude, but her own understanding of what she had always been. She wasn't a radio operator who had become a soldier. She had always been a soldier who happened to operate radios. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos received the Silver Star for Valor in Combat Operations. The citation read, "For gallantry in action while serving as communications coordinator during the rescue of 12 soldiers trapped behind enemy lines." Sergeant Santos voluntarily exposed herself to enemy fire while coordinating close air support and medical evacuation, directly resulting in the successful recovery of all personnel with no additional casualties. But the real recognition came every day in the communications tent, where soldiers who once dismissed her as the radio girl now came to her for advice, for coordination, for the kind of tactical expertise that could only come from someone who understood that in modern warfare, information and communications were the most powerful weapons of all. And when new soldiers arrived at the base and made jokes about playing with radios, Morrison and the others were quick to set them straight. They would tell them about the day their communications specialist single-handedly coordinated a rescue mission that saved 12 lives. The day they learned that the woman they had underestimated was the strongest soldier among them. The day Maria Santos proved that heroes aren't always the ones carrying the biggest guns. Sometimes they're the ones carrying the most important messages. The end.